Award-winning TV presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
One Palestinian was martyred and 2 others were wounded by Israeli gunfire in Nablus and the West Bank. Palestinians in Gaza walk in a funeral procession mourning the death of Ismael Abu Shanab and his bodyguards. From Gaza, our correspondent Shireen Yunus.
Tens of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza participated in the funeral procession of Abu Shanab and his 2 bodyguards, while also marching in a massive demonstration in the streets of Gaza city. The demonstrators demanded that the military wing of Hamas immediately retaliate for the assassination of Ismael Abu Shanab.
Osama al-Baz, a political advisor to the Egyptian president, will meet with Palestinian president to revive the implementation of the ceasefire after Hamas and Islamic Jihad announced that it was officially over.
There are ongoing Egyptian efforts to pick up the pieces of the dead ceasefire, urging the Palestinians to curb the resistance activities. It does not seem that it will produce any tangible results, even if all the Palestinian security forces were united under one banner. Israel is not giving the Palestinian public any other option except to reject any decision that may affect the Palestinian factions.
2 U.S. soldiers were killed and 6 others were wounded in 2 new attacks against U.S. forces in Iraq. From Baghdad, Hamza Hussein.
2 American soldiers were killed in 2 separate incidents in Baghdad and Hilya in southern Iraq. However, these incidents did not divert the United Nations' attention from the shock of the attack on its headquarters and the death of its special representative, Sergio de Milo. De Milo's body was being transferred from Baghdad to be buried in France after a dignified ceremony at the Baghdad airport.
This is the end of the news in brief. Peace be upon you and welcome to the news. Today, more than 100,000 Palestinians marched in the funeral procession of Ismael Abu Shanab. He was a prominent leader in the Islamic resistance movement Hamas. Abu Shanab and his 2 bodyguards were killed yesterday during an air raid targeting them in Gaza. People at the funeral procession demanded an immediate retaliation. Meanwhile, Hamas and the Islamic Jihad officially declared the end of the truce, which called for the stopping of operations against Israel and was announced 7 weeks ago. Now to our correspondent in Gaza, Shireen Yunus.
The Israeli occupation forces imposed a siege on some areas in the Gaza Strip, in addition to Israeli military and tank incursions into the southern areas of the Strip. Meanwhile, Israel threatens to wage more military attacks, targeting leaders of the Palestinian resistance. However, this did not stop the Palestinians from attending the funeral of the 3 martyrs from Hamas, Engineer Abu Shanab and the 2 men who were with him, Hani Abu al-Umrain and Mu'min Baroud.
Ismael Abu Shanab يعني بطل من أبطال فلسطين.
Ismael Abu Shanab is a Palestinian hero. Ismael Abu Shanab will be remembered in Palestinian history for his bravery and for uniting our fronts and our resistance to the extent of sacrificing one's own self.
Abu Shanab and his bodyguards' funeral procession departed from various mosques in Gaza, with massive rallies passing through the city streets. The marchers, belonging to different affiliations, called for avenging the martyrs' death by waging attacks against Israel.
We from the Aqsa Martyrs Brigade are now saying that after assassinating engineer Ismael Abu Shanab and his bodyguards, we are not obligated to this truce, and our response will be hard and painful for the Zionist entity.
The truce has now ended. Fighting is the only solution. Sharon will understand that he chose a difficult path. And if God is willing, Al-Qassam's strike will be earth-shattering.
According to Hamas leaders, the Israeli government has crossed all red lines by assassinating martyr Abu Shanab, who was one of Hamas's prominent and most moderate leaders. Thus, Hamas will not be the only one avenging his assassination, especially now that the leaders of all the Palestinian factions who attended Abu Shanab's funeral announced that they are suspending the truce, disregarding announcements made by Israeli governmental sources saying that they will stop attacks against Palestinian resistance fighters for a period of 24 hours.
This announcement was made for propaganda and public relations purposes. They want to put more pressure on the Palestinian side, forcing them to take undesired actions, such as internal confrontations.
Abu Shanab's assassination killed the truce, and the Israeli government continues to allow its military forces to target more leaders of the Palestinian factions. Thus, this will further escalate the situation and renew the cycle of violence in the region, beginning with Israeli attacks and ending with Palestinian retaliatory operations. Shireen Yunus, Abu Dhabi TV, Gaza.
3 decades have passed by since a Zionist extremist from Australia burned the Aqsa Mosque in 1968. Occupied Jerusalem is still subjected to the same Israeli policies. Consecutive Israeli governments consistently took quick measures to Jewify the holy city, alleging that it is the eternal capital of Israel. Jerusalem is the city to which Prophet Muhammad made a spiritual journey. However, Israel used all means to achieve its objective, including building settlements all around the city and confiscating property from the Palestinians, forcing them to leave their cities. 34 years have passed since the Jewish extremist Michael Rohan set fire to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. He was aiming to destroy it completely and build a Temple Mount in its place. This incident alerted people to the threat posed against the third holiest place for Muslims. Israel occupied Jerusalem in the 1967 war after defeating the Arab countries. At the time, people voiced their concerns throughout the Muslim world, but the only result was the establishment of the International Islamic Conference. It encompasses more than 50 countries, but it is useless. More than 3 decades have passed since the Al-Aqsa Mosque was burned, but nothing has changed concerning the status of the holy city. The Islamic holy places are still being subjected to threats from Jewish extremists who enjoy the protection of the Israeli government. Furthermore, the Israeli government continues digging tunnels under the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Day after day, the Israeli government continues Judifying Jerusalem in attempts to hide its Islamic and Arabic identity by overpowering the Arab residents. Their property is confiscated to force them to leave. In addition, Jerusalem city is surrounded by Jewish settlements that separate it from the rest of the West Bank. Furthermore, consecutive Israeli governments announced that Jerusalem is Israel's eternal capital, refusing to negotiate this issue with the Palestinians. On September 28th, the Likud party leader and current Prime Minister Ariel Sharon visited the site of Al-Aqsa Mosque, evoking the Palestinians' emotions and triggering the second intifada, which was stopped in the last 2 months. However, the intifada may be resumed, especially after the most prominent Palestinian resistance organization, Hamas, ended the ceasefire agreement in response to the assassination of one of its leaders, Ismael Abu Shanab. The Israeli government realizes the importance of Jerusalem and its holy places to the Arabs and Muslims, but it cares less about their feelings. Palestinians who are less than 4 years old and live outside Jerusalem are forbidden from entering the holy city and praying in Al-Aqsa Mosque for what Israel calls security reasons. Furthermore, the Israeli Minister of Interior recently threatened the Islamic Awqaf institution with the use of force if it does not allow tourists to enter the Al-Haram al-Sharif vicinity willingly. The Islamic Awqaf institution was forced to comply with the Israeli demands, fearing that something worse may happen if they do not agree to let foreign tourists to visit the alleged Temple Mount.
Whereas on the Palestinian resistance groups were driving the final nail into the truce, President Hosni Mubarak's top advisor Osama al-Baz paid a visit to Ramallah for talks with Palestinian officials aimed at crafting a new agreement. Al-Baz met with Palestinian President Yasser Arafat, Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas, and Foreign Minister Nabil Shaf for 3 hours. Following the talks, Al-Baz told reporters it was necessary to bring the situation under control.
It is very important to stop this escalation and the situation and begin to bring the situation back to where it was when the Hudna was enforced. And it was enforced, as we understand, for 51 days. And this is a very good record. We can build upon that and maintain, regenerate the momentum for movement. Otherwise, as I said in Arabic, the situation will be catastrophic to everybody.
Al-Baz is also to meet with Israeli Foreign Minister Silvan Shalom. Meanwhile, U.S. officials said John Wolf, Washington's chief peace watchdog, hastily dispatched to the region, had scheduled a new round of talks with the Palestinians on Friday after conferring with both sides a day earlier. Israeli occupation soldiers shot dead a Palestinian and seriously wounded 2 others on Friday in the northern West Bank city of Nablus. Palestinian security sources said the 3 Palestinians were on the roof of Manar hospital when soldiers traveling aboard an army jeep opened fire on them. Meanwhile, Israeli security was tight at the Wailing Wall complex in East Jerusalem on Friday, with special riot police positioning themselves in anticipation of violence following Friday prayers. Dozens of specially equipped riot police cover the entrances to the Temple Mount, but no violence was reported. Israeli soldiers went door to door in the West Bank town of Nablus searching for wanted Palestinians and illegal weapons. Israeli tanks also remained on show around Ramallah, repositioning themselves at the major entrances to the West Bank city.
Engineer Ismael Abu Shanab was one of the building stones and founders of the Islamic movement Hamas, who played many significant roles since its formation. He was also arrested and imprisoned for 10 years at the occupation prisons. Here's more in this report. Martyr engineer Ismael Abu Shanab was born in Gaza in 1950. He was married and had 8 children. Originally, he is from Shurat al-Majdal in 1948 occupied territories. And Abu Shanab got his BS in civil engineering from the University of Mansoura in Egypt in 1977. Consequently, he worked as an engineer at UNRWA, where then he became chief of the engineering department at the agency. He continued his postgraduate studies, where he got his master's degree in civil engineering in the United States. The first Intifada in 1987 was the beginning of the appearance of Abu Shanab as a politician who adopted the line of resistance and struggled for it in the lines of Hamas that was just growing up then. Abu Shanab was arrested in 1989 and convicted of leading the political wing of Hamas during the first Intifada and after the capture of the founder and spiritual leader of Hamas, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin. He spent 10 years in the occupation enemy prisons, and then he left to resume his work in Hamas, where he played a very significant role in its political wing. Abu Shanab was one of the politicians who was keen to keep the Palestinian internal coherence and was sure that any kind of internal turmoil will be a service for free for the enemy. During the last television broadcast interview after the martyrdom operation done by Hamas in occupied Jerusalem, he stressed on the importance of debate and internal solidarity.
We didn't ask him to meet us, so he initiated the meeting and he himself postponed it. Second, the dialogue among Palestinians is the key element of our strength, and nobody can stop this dialogue unless he is intending to break the Palestinian unity. And I don't think that Abu Mazen is intending to do so.
Israeli radio described Martyr Abu Shanab soon after his assassination as number 4 in Hamas, where he was regularly on the list of assassinations whom Israel intends to execute. As usual, Israel again took revenge from a man who always used to hurt the enemy by his words, political speeches, and his anti-occupation stances. But this won't ever quell the resistance. While on the political level, Israel said it will continue its targets on Hamas in the coming days, and on Friday it invaded Jenin and staged a search campaign in the northern West Bank city. In occupied Jerusalem, security was tight, and Hamas lobbed more than a dozen mortar bombs at Israeli settlements in the Gaza Strip in what it labeled as the initial response on Abu Shanab's assassination.
Israel occupation revealed its non-commitment to the ceasefire Friday, saying it will continue to strike without mercy whom it labeled as terrorists, those who carry out attacks, as well as those who plan them or order them. A high-ranking Israeli official, on condition of anonymity, voiced this already practiced policy without specifying what means Israel would use. But according to Israeli radio, the army could continue its policy of targeted killings against Hamas in the coming days.
It's an attempt to lobby Hamas to return to the truce under conditions other than those which enable it to claim any time it wants to say that there is an Israeli violation. That's why Hamas says it has a right to retaliate and stages a suicide operation. The Palestinian Authority and Israel are trying via Dahlan's crackdown threats and Israel's liquidation threats to return to the truce, which is in coma and which can be revived through electric shocks.
On Friday, Israeli occupation troops tightened security in occupied Jerusalem as Palestinians promised to avenge the assassination of Ismael Abu Shanab. In initial strikes, Palestinians in the Gaza Strip fired 4 homemade rockets at Israeli settlements overnight, damaging a house in Sderot settlement. Fighters also fired some 15 mortar shells at Israeli settlements and army outposts in the Gaza Strip, causing heavy damages to several houses and cars. Hamas claimed responsibility for the attacks, saying they are an initial response to the Israeli helicopter missile attack on Abu Shanab. Israeli troops reimposed a roadblock on the main highway through the Gaza Strip Friday morning, cutting the territory into 2. Earlier Friday, at least 15 tanks and jeeps invaded the town of Jenin and its adjacent refugee camp on various sites, with troops firing flares as they went. Palestinian fighters responded and heavy shooting broke out. At dawn, the Israeli army troops imposed a curfew on the city as it pressed on with its house-to-house searches, which resulted in at least 2 arrests. A similar aggression was conducted in Jenin early Thursday. Israeli troops arrested 3 Palestinians, saying they belonged to Islamic Jihad movement. Also overnight, in the West Bank town of Nablus, the Israeli occupation troops destroyed the house of Samer al-Nouri, the organizer of Tel Aviv martyrdom operation that killed 22 Israelis and injured dozens more.
An Iraqi girl was killed when an improvised bomb she picked up to play with exploded in the northern city of Mosul, according to a U.S. military spokesman. And Meanwhile, U.S. Central Command has confirmed that high-ranking Iraqi official Ali Hassan al-Majid, a cousin of Saddam Hussein, has been captured by U.S. forces.
After mounting criticism directed toward the United States policies in Iraq and its ability to maintain security, the U.S. military confirmed the capture of Ali Hassan al-Majid, known as Chemical Ali. Al-Majid, the cousin of Saddam Hussein and number 5 on the U.S. list of most wanted Iraqis, was in custody according to a statement from U.S. Central Command in Tampa, Florida. Majid's arrest raised to 39 the declared number of most wanted former Iraqi officials killed or captured since U.S.-led forces ousted Saddam in April. But U.S. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, who confirmed the capture, said 42 of the 55 on the list have now been either killed or captured. Speaking alongside Rumsfeld, the head of the U.S. Central Command, General John Abizaid, provided few details about the capture, saying he didn't want to provide any information that would jeopardize U.S. intelligence. Abizaid avoided any direct comment on whether the former Iraqi official was helping to organize any anti-American resistance. Majid's detention comes after the arrest this week of former Iraqi Vice President Taha Yassin Ramadan. U.S. and British officials in early April targeted Majid in a bomb attack in Basra. British military officials said at the time they believed they had recovered his body, while Rumsfeld said he believed the reign of terror of Chemical Ali has come to an end. Then Rumsfeld acknowledged in June that he might have escaped death. The White House hailed the capture of Majid. White House spokesman Scott McClellan said in his capture is another important step in going after the remnants of the former regime. The United States has blamed recent situation in Iraq, including near daily attacks on U.S. troops and the bombing of the UN headquarters in Baghdad, and a combination of remnants of Saddam's regime. However, the gains in catching Saddam's henchmen have failed to lead to an end to the attacks against US-led troops, bringing the declared number of combat deaths since May 1 to 63.
Two days after the arrest of Taha Yassin Ramadan, the deputy of the ousted Iraqi president Saddam Hussein, the occupation forces arrested Ali Hassan al-Majid, known as Chemical Ali. The following report explains who Chemical Ali is.
After the
death of Uday and Qusay Saddam Hussein, and after the arrest of the number 2 man in the former Iraqi regime, Taha Yassin Ramadan, the American forces arrested Ali Hassan al-Majid, known as Chemical Ali. The U.S. Department of Defense confirmed the arrest of Chemical Ali, who was number 5 on the U.S. list of wanted Iraqis. They added that Ali Majid is alive and in good health. However, the American forces did not reveal where or how he was arrested. Al-Majid, the cousin of ousted Iraqi President Saddam Hussein, held senior positions in the former regime, the latest of which was regional commander of the southern area during the latest war. At the time, it was said that he was killed by the American forces. Al-Majid was called Chemical Ali because he led the airstrikes on Kurdish areas using chemical weapons, especially on Halabja in 1988, killing thousands of Kurds. Furthermore, according to international human rights organizations, Al-Majid is responsible for the killing or disappearance of 100,000 Kurds. After the first Gulf War, Al-Majid continued eliminating the opposition of the former Iraqi regime, including the rebellious Shiites of southern Iraq, killing thousands more. In addition, after the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, Al-Majid was appointed to what the former regime called Iraqi District Number 19. In reality, it was occupied Kuwait. In 1995, Al-Majid proved his absolute loyalty to Saddam Hussein when his own cousins, Hussein Kamil al-Majid and Saddam Kamal al-Majid, who also were the sons-in-law of Saddam Hussein, were executed. At the time, Iraqi newspapers called the execution the Jihad Revolution for punishing them for their rebellion and escape to Jordan. In addition, the official Iraqi media described the killing of the 2 men and their father as the killing of traitors.
The air bridge launched between Amman and Baghdad resumed its flights, bringing in more of those wounded at the UN headquarters explosion in Baghdad. The UN official in charge of overseeing the daily airlift that has involved an average of 3 planes a day said that so far 150 employees had left Baghdad to Amman since Wednesday. More planes are expected to arrive in Amman later tonight, carrying more wounded UN staff. UN coordinator in Amman hailed Jordan's efforts in offering its military planes in the evacuation process. 26 wounded staff who arrived yesterday to the kingdom have received treatment at Jordanian hospitals and are now out of the hospitals. His Majesty King Abdullah has earlier ordered the transfer of the UN workers injured in the blast for treatment in Jordanian hospitals. A U.S. soldier with a Marine unit was shot dead south of Baghdad. A gunman shot the soldier after approaching his vehicle, which had been caught up in traffic in the city of Hila, south of Baghdad. The attacker escaped into a crowded market. The U.S. military said another U.S. soldier was killed and 6 were wounded in a fire at a small arms range in Baghdad. The 6 soldiers were wounded when their vehicle ran over a homemade landmine near Baiji, north of Baghdad. One of them is still in a critical condition. Residents in Ramadi, a hotbed of anti-American violence west of Baghdad, said a rocket-propelled grenade struck a U.S. military vehicle today. There was no immediate word from the military on any casualties. A small ceremony was held at Baghdad airport for the UN top envoy on Iraq, who was killed by a bomb last Tuesday, ahead of his body being flown back to his country of origin in Brazil. 50-year-old Sergio Vieira de Mello has been working under the UN mandate for the past 33 years. He had told the Security Council in July that the UN presence in Iraq was vulnerable to anyone or any organization seeking to target the world body. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights since September, Vieira de Mello was the immediate choice of Secretary General Kofi Annan to take on the Iraqi job in May. A former Jordanian Al Arab al-Yawm columnist working as a spokesperson for the United Nations was killed in the explosion at the UN headquarters in Baghdad. 29-year-old Riham al-Farra was working in Arabic for the agency's public relations office in New York. Her first day of work in Baghdad was the day of the blast and the day she was killed. Riham had begun writing books, poetry, and stories at the age of 9. She grew up to be the first daily female political columnist in Jordan. She left Jordan in 2001 to continue her higher education in England and started her new job at the UN just 9 months ago. On behalf of Jordan Television, we extend our condolences to her family.
Iran's foreign ministry condemns the arrest by British police of former Iranian ambassador to Argentina, Hadi Suleimanpour, in connection with 1994 bombing of a Jewish center in Buenos Aires. Foreign Ministry spokesman Hamid Reza Safi on Friday assessed the warrant issued by an Argentine judge as politically motivated and lacking legal and judicial basis. He also said Iran will use all means available to secure the rights and freedom of the former Iranian ambassador to Argentina. Rejecting Iran's involvement in the bombing, Mr. Safi said the arrest warrant comes under the influence of the Zionist regime of Israel. Mr. Safi urged Argentina to consider the legal and political consequences of its action, which breaches the international law. He added Tehran will ask London for explanations over the arrest of the Iranian national there. This is while an Argentine security official admitted he had been involved in bribing a key witness in connection with 1994 bomb blast in a Jewish center in Buenos Aires, Argentina. An RIB correspondent in Caracas reports Isaac Eduardo Garcia told the Argentine federal court the bribery took place in 1996 under the cover of purchasing the copyright of a book Carlos Tejan, a key witness of Amia case, was writing at the time. Earlier, during the related court hearings 2 years ago, Tejan had acknowledged accepting the bribe to level charges against a number of police officers. And finally, Russia endorses the content of a draft agreement on repatriation of spent fuel from Iran's Bushehr nuclear power plant. Interfax reported on Friday the Russian cabinet has commissioned the Ministry of Atomic Energy to finalize the accord with Tehran. The draft agreement has been compiled through a joint effort by the Russian Ministries of Justice, Environment and Economic Development, as well as the Federal Security Service and the Russian Intelligence Service. Tehran and Moscow inked the agreement on construction of Bushehr nuclear power plant on August 25, 1992.
Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation,